I just kept on getting symptoms, just ongoing symptoms. And these symptoms just got more and more severe. And I had recurring bouts of this gastro bug, but I started losing weight like crazy. I had really bad joint pain, back pain was just crazy.
That's Ben Hampton. For more than a year, he was constantly sick, in pain, and out of sorts. The scariest part was he had no idea why. All the doctors and all the tests told Ben there was nothing wrong with him, but he didn't feel right and started to believe it was all in his head. It wasn't until a friend suggested he test for celiac disease that he finally got an answer and a whole new way of life, gluten-free. Ben's a busy father of two who's had to learn to adapt his life around celiac disease, and a big part of it is sharing his story. Welcome to Young Blood, an award-winning podcast on a mission to make the mental health of young men a top priority. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our platform to open up and share stories of what we've been through because we're not alone. Let's do it. Trigger warning, if you find anything spoken about in today's episode distressing, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. So Ben, what was your diet like throughout your life?
It was pretty rubbish, to be honest. Before my celiac diagnosis, it wasn't the best, and I wasn't really ever into like working out or nutrition or anything. I found that a lot later after my celiac diagnosis, and just sort of improving myself and my diet and my lifestyle and working out and that sort of stuff. But beforehand, it was pretty bad. You know, I was into partying and drinking with my mates and just eating a pretty rubbish sort of diet. But yeah, that really improved after the celiac diagnosis. I've been really working on myself and figuring out diet and exercise and how our mind and gut is really connected as well. And I've learned so much about myself since then.
So throughout your life, when you weren't really eating well and weren't taking the best care of yourself, how did you feel? And did you experience some of those symptoms through your childhood and your teenage years that you later came to find out were related to celiac?
Yeah, absolutely. Like looking back, there were a lot of signs and symptoms that I was going through, some things that would be associated with celiac disease for sure. You know, bloating, brain fog. I could never concentrate at school. I was just always kind of staring, at the board and not really taking much information in. And the really hard thing is, though, that celiac disease, it can be associated with over 200 known symptoms. So it just flies under the radar so much. And 1 in 70 people are estimated to have it in Australia, but wow. 80% are going undiagnosed, which is it's just insane. Yeah. So obviously I was one of those, and I talk to guests on my podcast all the time about it. So many people go undiagnosed with this disease, and
because it looks like so many other diseases, or it looks like so many, the symptoms are so common and associated with so many different things that it's really hard to nail it down.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was mostly like the brain fog. I'd get bloating, stomach aches, heaps. I'd have time off school thinking it was, like a stomach virus, or, I'd like have food poisoning or something. It'd always be associated to something else. And I was constantly having antibiotics. Like, I had so much time off school with being sick, and even in my early 20s, I had bouts of sickness that were just crazy. Like I'd have months and months of sickness, and it was just always put down to, you got a bad diet, you're probably not getting enough sleep, you've got, you're drinking a lot, so that's why your liver markers are up. Like there'd always be, some sort of, not excuse, I guess, because I don't know when my celiac disease was activated.
But some sort of explanation that wasn't celiac disease, that was your fault, basically, right?
Exactly. So knowing what celiac disease is now and the signs and symptoms of it, absolutely, I should have been screened for it. Like back when I was a kid in school.
And so as a kid and as a teenager and in your adult life, being told, oh, well, this is your fault because you're not looking after yourself. How did you respond to that? Like, did you try to implement things that were going to give you some better health, or did you ignore it? Did you get frustrated with it?
Yeah, for sure. I think I just sort of accepted that was the way that my body was. And when I'd speak to people, there'd always be those stages throughout your life. When you're a teenager, it's like, oh, you sleep a lot and you're always tired. Like that's just something you go through when you're at school. Like I didn't really question that. Not being able to focus. It's like, well, you got a bad diet, or you're not exercising enough, or you're not doing the right things in your own lifestyle. And it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough. And like with the bloating and the stomach aches, it's like, well, same sort of thing. You know, you're not looking after your body, you're not eating right.
Yeah.
So
and I guess to an extent,
kind of
maybe
shoved
people
off.
would say just bad luck of the draw, having symptoms like that. It's
Yeah,
like, oh, well, your body just doesn't function all that well, and that's sort of bad luck. And if you're so used to that over time, you think, oh, I guess this is just my lot and what I have to put up with. But the whole time it was something that is very treatable, that is just flying under the surface.
that's it. And I think what really kicked it off was actually in 2020, at the end of 2020, I was diagnosed. But throughout that entire year, I had crazy, crazy symptoms. And I think that's when it was truly activated. If it wasn't fully activated beforehand,
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I had pretty much every symptom that you can read on celiac symptoms. I had bloating, brain fog. I had a lot of mental issues as well. Anxiety, depression was really kicking in. I just couldn't focus on anything. I was just so spaced out. We had our first daughter. I was in a mess. And I think it was being put down to that again, flying under the radar. Look, you're stressed. You just had a virus. And at the beginning of 2020, actually, my wife and I caught a gastro bug that my daughter brought home from daycare. As you do with with daycare, you're always catching the bugs that the kids bring home. And yeah, we all caught it, but they seemed to improve within a couple of weeks, both of them. But I just kept on getting symptoms, just ongoing symptoms. And these symptoms just got more and more severe. And I had recurring bouts of this gastro bug, but I started losing weight like crazy. I had really bad joint pain, back pain was just crazy. Yeah, not being able to focus on anything, which, people in the celiac and gluten-free space called brain fog. Yeah, literally just not being able to concentrate on a single thing at all, just losing my focus with anything. And it just got worse and worse. And I was going to a health professional, to a doctor, to ask about what was going on. And they said, look, get on the probiotics, start cleaning up your diet a little bit. Don't change your diet drastically. And that is one thing that I should have.
That was the only thing you needed to do. Well, not the only thing, but the main thing.
Yeah. But they kept on saying, like, I don't think it's diet related. This can't be diet related. I think it's something else that's going on. So we'll test for different things, like I had a blood test, CT, MRI, the works basically. And this kept on going on for, 6 to 12 months, basically this entire year. And by the end of it, I was an absolute mess. Like, I was pale as anything. I had lost 10 kilos. I felt like I was on death's door. And I knew that something was severely wrong with me. If it wasn't something physical, then something mentally was stopping me from somehow, eating the right foods or something. I was doing something to myself that I knew just wasn't sitting right. And I needed an answer for it, and I just wasn't getting it. And it was only when my wife's friend actually had a celiac disease diagnosis at the year before in 2019. And she said, look, ask your doctor for this. And I brought it forward to my doctor, and they were like, well, look, we've pretty much done everything else. We can't spot anything. There's nothing major going on. So let's give it a go. We'll see what happens. They rang me back up, sat in the doctor's office, and they were like, you are severely celiac. Like, your results are literally off the charts. We can't read them. So you need to go on a gluten challenge, which is where you need to eat gluten for a period of 6 weeks and then have an endoscopy. And then they take a little sample, a biopsy of your small intestine, and they see if your villi have been damaged. And that's how they can basically diagnose if you're celiac. And I had that done. The gastroenterologist said, look, your charts right now, I can tell you're definitely celiac. I just want to check that you haven't done some really bad damage, that, having this celiac disease diagnosis. And so, yeah, they did the testing and it came back, and he rang and said, yeah, you have celiac disease, 100% go gluten-free for the rest of your life. And then this whole roller coaster started.
It's crazy that given that you had all those symptoms, that doctors and all the people that you went to for help wouldn't say, hey, these are celiac symptoms. Maybe we should test for celiac. That's pretty surprising. But I guess just goes to show that commonly it isn't diagnosed, and that those symptoms look like a whole range of other things that they tested for that came up blank. But during that 12-month period, when doctors were saying like, look, you're fine, maybe to the point of it's in your head, what were you thinking? What did you put it down to? How did you view yourself? Did you think I'm going crazy, or what was that like in your head?
So the answer is yes, I thought I was going crazy. And that in itself was really hard to deal with. I think I've always had some sort of form of hypochondria growing up. I think it's always something that I've had to deal with. But thinking about, if I ever did have something serious going on with my health, it's always been in the back of my head. And it's been something that's really impacted my life in a massive way. I was really overweight at school. I think something to do with that and health, and that my family never really talked about health related things. We'd always kind of shy away from the subject if it was ever brought up. So I'd always kind of have, I don't know, a bit of a...
Like a stigma?
A bit of a, a bit of a propensity to kind of think that something was always kind of wrong with me anyway. And I'd have this thing in my head that like, what if anything were to happen down the track? I don't know how I would mentally and physically deal with that.
Because hypochondria is thinking that you're sick when you're not, or over worrying about the possibility of getting sick. But it's interesting you're saying that, because by all accounts, you did have something going on in the background, and sort of like your body or your mind was trying to say, hey, something isn't right. And so those signals, they were there for a reason, it seems like.
That's it. And I think in a way, in a really ironic way, I guess the celiac disease diagnosis kind of confirmed that I should be kind of, not to the form of like hypochondria to be constantly worrying about my health, because I don't think that's healthy at all, but to have some degree of, seeking out help for your health, whether that be physical or mental, just to be kind of on the lookout for how your diet's going, how you're looking after yourself in all aspects, holistically, like physically and mentally.
Yeah, because it's so connected. Because I think we've always thought of mental and physical health as being separate, but the more research is done, the more we find how intertwined those are. And there's so much research coming out now about gut health in particular, and microbiome and how that impacts the brain. And we're just learning so much more about how important that is. What about you being a father during that time? So you just had your second daughter, so you're the father of two young children, and you're spending a lot of time in bed. You're essentially not able to operate properly. What kind of pressure did that put on you and your relationship with your partner as well? Because that must have been really hard, and must have made you feel insecure, or like not enough of a man or not enough of a dad at times.
Yeah, that was definitely something I struggled with. We only had our one daughter at that stage. Our second daughter was born after my diagnosis, but even just having our first daughter, and my wife kind of having to take the load of the whole process the whole time, looking after our daughter and bringing her up. And I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. I was still operating. I was still going to work, but I was having so much time off work. I was, just hauled over in pain a lot of the time, just having to be near a bathroom, and all the while not knowing what was going on as well. Like, I'm someone who's just like, if they have an answer to something, like, I guess that's the practical side of me. It's like, okay, I have an answer to this. I can move forward with it, but not having an answer to why all this crap is going on with me.
Yeah, that's the worst.
It was horrible. Yeah. And I clearly actually remember a moment, just, looking at my daughter while I was changing her, and she sort of looked at me. I don't know if it was just the way, my brain was feeling at that moment and the amount of brain fog and not being able to focus, but like, I was just looking at her. And I swear she just looked back at me and was just like, what? You're just changing so much. Like, I can't really see my dad, And it was really hard. And I looked in the mirror at that point and I was like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Like, you look like crap and you got to sort this out. So I went back to my doctor, and that was when I started getting, a lot more testing. And I was just like, we got to figure this out. Like, what's going on? Yeah.
How did your partner support you through that time? What was she saying to you? Because being on the receiving end of that, where you're trying to raise a child with someone, and then that person who you've fallen in love with and decided to be with and have a child with is falling apart and no one knows why. Like, there's a lot of difficulty there for the partner, feeling helpless, I imagine, as to how do they help you? Was she encouraging you to go and get all the tests, or how did she handle all of that?
Oh, she's just been the most amazing support ever. She's just incredible. The most strong, resilient person I know in my life, hands down. She has just been there from, day one, just supporting me, pushing me to figure out what was going on. But she has had a chat to me post-diagnosis, and she has explained that, I was like seriously worried about you. She didn't know either. And she just wanted an answer like me so we could figure out what was going on and just to move forward with that, but not having an answer herself. She was like, well, what do we do? You've been for all this testing. We were in lockdown at this point as well. So It was like so hard to go get testing and have procedures done and booking in for doctors in general. Like they were flat chat, and fair enough. Like they were, they were doing everything they could, and resources were way down for them. And so I seriously feel for health professionals in that way too. But yeah, my wife has just been a huge support. But yeah, she was like super worried and having to have that load of, not getting much sleep, breastfeeding our bub and taking that whole thing on as well. And I was doing what I could, but like I was just an absolute mess towards the end before I actually got my positive blood test. I was just totally out of it. Like I was putting things where they shouldn't be and, just doing a whole bunch of random stuff that just didn't make sense. And it was actually making my wife's job of, helping raise our daughter just way harder. And I just felt, as you said, like, I guess a bit less of a man, just not even being able to, perform my job as a father and a husband, which was, terrible. But she's just been just an absolute rock. And even after post-diagnosis, she's just been incredible. Just the biggest support in my life.
Lucky you had her there. Would have been bad if you were a single parent or if you were just by yourself going through all that. What were you worried was going to happen?
I honestly thought I was dying. I thought I had some sort of severe form of cancer, something like that going on with me. And I guess that was the thing that was always playing in the back of my head. And I think becoming a father as well, that really changes your mindset. It's not just about yourself anymore. And you've got this little person in the world that like, it's yours. And, you've brought this little person into the world and they count on you for everything, to have the thought of like not being there with them. I think that's what was doing my head in a lot. Yeah, I'm just so happy that I was able to get a diagnosis and get out of that space. And I had an answer at the end of the day too. Like that was the main thing.
What was your response when you got that diagnosis, and how did you start to implement it or face that new problem straight away?
Yeah. So shock, total shock. When I sat in the doctor's office, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like I started looking into celiac disease and the signs and symptoms of it, and like everything. Okay, like the bloating, the brain fog, the joint pain, the looking pale, as losing tons of weight. Like I was really skinny, lost 10 kilos, as I said, and I'm a small person to begin with. So yeah, just a mix of shock, but also just sort of being happy to have an answer at the end of the day, and then finding out what I need to do to get healthier and to, build myself back up again mentally and physically. And so basically with celiac disease, I probably should explain that too. With celiac disease, it's an autoimmune disease. It's not an allergy as many people think it is. And so when people ingest gluten, when they have celiac disease, it damages the small intestine, these things called villi, which are these things that absorb all the nutrients when you eat the food that we ingest. And when people have those villi blunted with celiac disease, you can't absorb the nutrients properly into your body. And so that's why you're getting all these different, health effects that are happening to, anemia, osteoporosis. Some people you can even get some form of cancers because there's so much inflammation in the intestines and all over the body at that stage. And so you have to follow, the only known treatment for it at this stage is a strict lifelong adherence to a gluten-free diet. Yeah, I've just been following that and figuring that out for the last 2 years now. And it's a process. It's a serious process. Basically having to avoid, a crumb of gluten for the rest of your days is, it's pretty full on. And the thing that I think people get confused about a lot is the cross-contamination aspect of it. So it's fine. You could, people know what a gluten-free, there's so many gluten-free options out there these days. But when you're eating out at a cafe or a restaurant or even at a friend or family's place, it's so awkward. There's that social aspect to it.
Yeah.
That you have to be so careful not to get cross-contaminated. Yeah.
So like if someone has been preparing that, but they're touching that with the gloves or that touched something else that wasn't, and then a crumb of something that's not gluten-free somehow gets into that, then that's enough to put you in hospital or give you serious complications.
Yeah, so I luckily don't have to be like hospitalized when I've been glutened that I know of. That's the other thing. You sometimes don't even know if you've been glutened or not, if it's just other symptoms altogether. But I definitely know when it happens with me, like I'll just, first thing that happens is the brain fog. Like I'll just completely space out. I kind of explain to people it's like a seriously bad hangover or you just had a huge bender. Like that's the way I often describe it to people. You just be,
just can't function.
Spewing or coming from the other end. Yeah. And then I get like mouth ulcers, really bad mouth ulcers and just horrible stomach pain and bloating and just, can't think properly. Some people do unfortunately get hospitalized with it because they will just be like exorcist style. They'll just be projectile vomiting and coming out both ends and it gets really violent. But luckily I kind of go the other way and nothing kind of happens for a few days and then a lot happens.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Oh, so it's delayed. It's not an instantaneous thing.
It can be. It kind of depends on the situation and what sort of gluten I've ingested. Yeah, mine is really random. I've had some bouts of it happening straight after I've eaten, but then other times it can be totally delayed and happen like the next day. It's and that's why it's so hard to track as well and know if it is actually gluten that you've ingested or if you just caught a virus or it's like a stomach bug or something. Yeah. But if you constantly do that, like a one-off glutening, as we say, it's a glutening. If you ingest gluten as a celiac, like that one-off, it just happening as a one-off time isn't such a serious issue. But if that's going on for an ongoing basis, that can be a really, really serious situation and it can lead to some horrible health effects. As I said, some forms of cancers, lymphomas, that sort of thing.
Far out. Yeah, it's obviously so intricately connected with so many serious health things. And yeah, I think unless you've got celiac disease or you know someone who does, it's just one of those things that people have no idea about. And like my girlfriend is gluten-free and she's the only person that I know who is, but she's not celiac, but just has that intolerance there. But like I didn't even really know much about that. And I think maybe it even has a bit of a stigma attached to it of, oh yeah, you're gluten-free, like it's not a real thing kind of an attitude from some people. But obviously it has a major impact and it's affecting so many people who don't even know about it.
Yeah, that's it. And I had no idea about celiac disease or the gluten-free diet before at all myself as well. Like I had no idea what gluten was. And I don't think I even really had heard of celiac disease either. I don't know if that was just, my kind of ignorance. I might have heard it, mentioned at some point in passing conversation with friends or family or whatever, but never really heard of it. And ironically, I used to mock people, like a lot of people used to mock people on all sorts of different diets. Yeah, ironically, I ended up with having to be on a very strict, lifelong gluten-free diet, which, it still gets a fair bit of stigma.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of clearing up now that people usually are on it for, medical reasons, not just lifestyle factors. And obviously it does things to us with people with celiac disease and people who medically require it for other reasons.
Athletic Greens has jumped on board as a podcast sponsor, and I'm really keen to introduce you to AG1, the one-stop shop nutritional drink that does wonders to support mental and physical health. If you're anything like me, you want to take the best possible care of your mind and body, and finding an easy method you can trust to help keep everything in peak condition sounds like the perfect tool. That's where AG1 comes in. Just one daily scoop of AG1 covers all your nutritional bases and supports long-term gut health with 75 vitamins, minerals, pre and probiotics, adaptogens, and a greens blend all sourced from whole food ingredients. Think of it like a cheat code to give you more energy, increased mental clarity, better sleep, and improved digestion, all while boosting your immune system. You wouldn't think mixing all those vitamins together would taste great, but AG1 is actually delicious and something to look forward to first thing in the morning that makes you feel unstoppable. You don't need to take a handful of pills or eat a massive variety of foods to tick all the boxes. Just shake up your AG1 in water, drink it down, and start reaping the benefits. It saves time and energy and gives you peace of mind that you're fueling your body with the best. AG1 has been endorsed by world-renowned neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman and some of the biggest podcasters on earth like Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, and now me. So you can guarantee it's legit. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but producing the podcast is purely volunteer and I actually have to pay for studio time and editing. Every dollar we make from this partnership will go towards helping to cover production costs, so it's an awesome way to support your health, support the podcast, and young men's mental health all in one. If you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/youngblood. That's athleticgreens.com/youngblood. Check it out. So how's your quality of life changed since getting that all sorted out?
I think just way better. Honestly, like even just a couple of days into going gluten-free after my diagnosis, it just improved so much. The brain fog lifted, was able to like think clearly for once. Yeah, just the bloating, all that joint pain and back pain and stuff. It stayed for a while, but gluten can take a while to get out of the body, even after you go gluten-free. And everything just sort of lifted. And I honestly felt like after a couple of days on the gluten-free diet, like I was just having like 2 or 3 cups of coffee, like every couple of hours. I was like, oh, what? Is this how people are supposed to be feeling? Oh, okay, this is cool. Yeah, I could get used to this. Just way more energy, and I had way much more, time and energy for my family, which was the biggest thing for me, just having more energy to be with my child and soak everything up and just be fun and do stuff with them. And same with my wife as well, just being able to go out with our bub and do stuff. And I was just in the here and now and not like, holed up in bed or feeling like crap. Yeah, it was awesome.
And you must have learned a lesson about trusting your gut, so to speak. I think it's probably appropriate for this, but trusting yourself and knowing, hey, I feel strongly in the back of my mind that something's not right, and suffering from that for so long. And in the end, you were right about that. And I think there's an important lesson there where if you're not getting the feedback or you're not getting the answers to solve whatever that riddle is, you still got to keep looking for the answers and not just accept, well, I'm just broken, or it's all in my head and I'm never going to be fixed. Because you could have done that in your position with all those medical professionals saying, look, it's nothing other than, well, either something we have no idea about or something that's in your head. Like, you totally could have just convinced yourself that that was just your lot and you should just try and live with it. But you didn't. You kept looking for answers and fortunately found them. But I think that's an important lesson for anyone who's going through something similar. Like, if you feel deeply within yourself that something's not right still, you got to keep looking for that answer till you find it so that you can improve your life, because it's got to be something.
100% agree. Yeah. And I think that's the problem with celiac disease. A lot of people give up, and especially guys. I think for a lot of autoimmune diseases, they say that the statistics are that it is predominantly women who live with these diseases. But I really do wonder if that is because guys are just so hesitant to come forward for testing. And to, have that stigma, that Australian stigma of like, let's just, bottle this up and not talk about it. And that never does anything good. Like, let's be honest, and I'm sure you've spoken to so many people on this podcast who have said the same thing. Like, whenever you bottle something up, it'll come back in another way. It'll come back either mentally or physically. But yeah, just to reach out to a health professional if you're not feeling right, and to seek out another answer as well, not to feel like, you've spoken to one doctor or one psychologist. I see a psychologist now, and it's awesome. I would encourage anybody to go see a psychologist if you're not feeling right and you feel like you need to speak to someone, and friends or family, you don't feel like that's a safe space, or you're not getting good enough feedback from them, or they're not listening, just go and speak to someone and book in with them. And if something doesn't feel right, if you don't find the right person, do not feel bad to just find a second opinion. At the end of the day, it's your health, your mental and physical health, and that's priority. Because if you can't look after yourself, as I've found out, you can't help anybody else. Yeah.
I think part of it is getting over that embarrassment factor as well with that condition in particular. That's really tough. But even for men in general, when it comes to mental health, traditionally we've found that hard to get over that. I should be embarrassed that I feel like I have to go and talk to someone about my feelings. But in this case, talking about celiac disease, because of the kind of symptoms that come along with that, they're not necessarily, they don't make us feel particularly dignified when when we're having problems with those sorts of things. So it's definitely something that people would want to bury or not want to address, or sort of hope goes away, because it's awkward too, or it can be. But again, that's in your mind as well, because we're so worried about how we're perceived, or that we might be looked at in a certain way, and we're worried about the embarrassment factor. But really everyone's just worried about themselves. And so it must have been difficult to get over that part of it too. What was your experience with dealing with the embarrassment side of it?
Oh, for sure. Like in the first place, sitting down with a doctor and being like, I'm crapping myself, first of all, and I can't control my bowels. That's not a thing you want to tell your doctor. It's like, how are your bowel movements at the moment? They're fine. Like, how are you feeling, in general? Like, not great. And it's like, well, how aren't you feeling great? And just even to have that conversation, I never felt comfortable talking about anything that was going wrong. I think because
and that's
of
the doctor. The doctor isn't your friend or your partner, and they don't care. They're a medical professional. They literally just need to know your symptoms so they can help you. And you still feel really embarrassed. And I've had my own experiences with things of that nature, and that's hard. Let alone being in the house with your wife or your child or your friends and family, and then having to explain that to them as well. Like that's hard to do too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a hard conversation to have at the best of times. And then following that as well, being diagnosed and having to be gluten-free, no one wants to be the person in general, whether you're a guy or a girl. Like, no one wants to sit at the table and be like, the one who the waitress comes over and it's like, okay, so who's ordering what? It's like, well, actually, I need the gluten-free menu, or I need to have what's gluten, and then asking a million questions.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do that now. I have to be that guy who I ironically, used to mock. Like, oh, they're on a gluten-free diet.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's some fancy thing. Like you're trying to look like, you're better than everyone else or something. That's the stigma attached to it. But obviously some people seriously do need gluten-free, and they need to make sure of that.
And that's the conversation to have with them as well. If anybody asks about it, it's like, well, if you got a spare 5 minutes, I can quickly tell you what celiac disease is. It's quite complicated. And they're like, after they hear that, they're like, wow, okay, I can see why you need this diet now. And I think to get that across as well, to say that it's for medical reasons, especially with staff or, whoever's making the food for you, to say that you medically require this diet. Otherwise, I will get violently ill, maybe here in your restaurant or cafe. You do not want to witness that.
There's a big incentive. There's a big incentive to get that right. Yeah.
Sure.
It's not just like some fad of, I feel like doing this because it's going to be good for my, like, how I look or something like that. It's a serious thing. So how do you manage your condition now in terms of how does that affect preparing food? And like you said, it's a bit tricky when you go out. How do you make sure that you don't get a crumb of gluten?
Yeah, so at home, I've really become, passionate about making food in general. But since my diagnosis, I've really just tried to help out in the kitchen as much as possible and make meals and prep food and stuff with my wife, who's an amazing cook. She has a Lebanese background, so she is all over, making awesome food, and she's taught me quite a lot. Yeah, we basically have the kitchen as like 99% gluten-free, just because I do prepare so many meals for the kids, and my wife and I, make so much food together. So just there's not that chance of getting cross-contaminated. We do have gluten for the girls and for my wife, and it's just in a separate cupboard. And so home is like pretty much a safe place, and I'm able to, make as much food as I want there and eat safely. Going out and eating somewhere else is a different story. And I'm still trying to get back into doing that. That's something I really enjoyed, going out and socializing and being with friends and family and just eating out in general. But it's such an awkward thing these days. Like, for example, I went to the pub with my mate yesterday, and I haven't really explained my, celiac disease and being gluten-free to him much at all. We didn't have much of a chance to catch up recently with lockdowns and COVID and such. But we went out and caught up for a beer. Well, he had a beer. They didn't really have many options for me. I'm able to have ciders and that sort of thing, but I've actually cut out drinking from my life too. It's another thing I've kind of taken on board recently because I just felt like crap last time I had a drink, and I've just haven't had one since. But I just took some pre-prepared food because it's just sometimes that's just easier. And I know like sometimes you get some weird looks and stuff, but I just don't care. I've got to take my health as a priority.
Yeah.
But I think awareness has really risen with celiac disease and the gluten-free diet now. There's so many more options, and people are a lot more aware of it. So
how's that taken? Like if you're being invited out somewhere and you're going to take your own food with you, or like, do you sometimes reject invitations and that sort of thing because you're just like, I can't be fucked, basically trying to navigate that? Or do you feel like there's still a lot of places where you go out to eat where they don't manage it well enough that you'd feel confident enough in it? Or like, how do you sort of weigh up whether or not you're going to go somewhere?
It's super tricky, and I'm still kind of trying to navigate that. I think people with celiac disease or who have been on a gluten-free diet for a long time, you start to get this like sixth sense. It's sort of this like hypervigilance issue. You're seriously wanting to make friends with that waiter, like, or at least I do. I want to be on their good side. I don't want anything bad to happen in the kitchen because I don't know what, the waiter or the chef is, accidentally going to do, or,
totally,
hopefully not, but, intentionally do anything.
Yeah. You kind of want to own the restaurant and, and having hired all the chefs and all the staff and be able to go into the kitchen and check, like, maybe that's what you need to work towards.
Yeah, well, there are actually 100, places that are 100% gluten-free, which is awesome. It's just like gluten-free heaven. You go in and you can just order whatever the hell you want, and it's, free reign, basically. You just knock yourself out. But most of the time that isn't, the situation. I've got to explain, that I have celiac disease and I need this meal 100% gluten-free. Have you got a separate fryer to, 100% gluten-free fryer where you don't fry other gluten-containing foods? Are your benches where you prepare the food, is that all clear of gluten? Are you not using the same utensils? Like, it's a whole thing. But
then you just say, I feel like a wanker doing it, but you have to.
Yeah, you do.
Trying to get, and I think especially as a man, like, so many men wouldn't want to be that guy and women too, but I think maybe men in particular, to be saying that, because a lot of mates would be like, who don't understand would be like, what are you talking about, mate? You're being a wanker. But it's just about that lack of awareness really into what goes into that. Are places all right with you bringing your own food, or would they be like, no, you can't do that here? Then that means you can't go out to eat.
Yeah. It's more like social gatherings and stuff, like if I'm going to an event or something at someone else's house, then it's okay to like bring, a plate of food or whatever. But I think, some places are okay with it. I've heard of people, and I've listened to people, they've shared with me on Instagram that they go to Macca's and they get like a gluten-free bun and they just order, the patty, and they put that together. That just sounds like way too much effort for me. I just don't actually have time for that sort of thing. But, I think people are open to that to an extent, but they may find it a little bit weird, or it might put other customers off or that sort of thing. So I think most people sort of tend to avoid that. You don't want to be sort of the person who brings their own milk, for example, or something to a cafe. And it's like, can you use this instead of, what you're using? So it's just the way of life for us.
That's tough because going out to eat is like
tricky.
It's one of the best things in life, I think, like being able to go out for lunch and go out for dinner and not really worry about it. It's just something that people like myself who don't suffer with that just take for granted, like being able to do that. But that's sweet, and that's really just good fun to be able to like have that freedom to do it, but it'd be tough to not be able to for that reason. So what positives have come out of having celiac disease?
I think just working on myself in all aspects. Obviously, just the physical symptoms, the mental symptoms lifting. Obviously, my body doesn't deal well with gluten. So when I went gluten-free, that is, how I should be living. I have an autoimmune reaction to this protein, which is, gluten, and I need to be off that. And once I did that, everything just felt so much better, and I just felt so much more energy. And as I said, but in all aspects, like I've kind of holistically looked after myself in every single way. As I said, I've seen a psychologist now, and I'm trying to regularly go back to see them and book in with them, because that has just made such a world of difference. Just sitting there with someone and going like, this is what's going on in my life. Do you have any suggestions or tips or strategies? And they're like, yeah, for sure. You could do this and you could try this, and maybe, start doing some journaling and start looking at things as, not everything all at once, and taking small steps to do things. And it's just getting that different perspective around things. And that's made a huge difference. Yeah, just making time for being with my family too, and having the energy to do that in the first place. And starting the podcast that I do as well, a gluten-free podcast, like starting that and speaking to all these people who have been in really similar situations and who have had some horrible things happen to them pre-celiac diagnosis, and seeing how they've dealt with their transition to their gluten-free lives has been awesome. And finding this community, like I'm a drummer and I've been in bands throughout my life, and sort of seen really niche communities, really niche musical communities. It's kind of like that. This really niche gluten-free community. We're all there to help each other be happy, healthy, and thriving with our best lives. And it's been really cool. And I've found a little niche community to network with and make friends with, and that's been awesome. And yeah, as I said, my wife has just been the number one support. I would not be doing any of this without her, and she's just been, I
think you've done well with the brownie points in this one. I think she'll be happy if she listens to this. But it seems like a real silver lining that you've ended up getting purpose out of dealing with this, which has been the hardest, or one of the hardest things you've ever dealt with in your life. And now you have a gluten-free podcast, and you have this community and this page, and you're helping people. And that's pretty similar to what I do, but I get a tremendous amount of purpose and meaning out of that. So you must be too. And often from tragedy or from hard times comes something that's positive that we can use to help other people. And yeah, what do you think about reflecting and saying, like, if I hadn't have gone through all this, then I wouldn't have this community. I wouldn't have this capacity to be able to impact people and help others. And that's all come from struggling and suffering and ultimately adapting.
That's it. That's exactly it. I think through struggles and hard times, and this is what I've found as well, maybe just, getting a little bit older and figuring out that the hard times can really be the best time as well. It can seem like the worst thing in your life at the time, and it may very well be, and you may need some help with that. But if you can get past that and sort of grow from that and learn from it, it just seems like one little hump in your life. And it's like, well, if I didn't go through that hump, then I wouldn't have figured out, to get to where I am now. And that's where I feel like, my celiac diagnosis was, and I've learned so many things about myself since going through that. It kind of all happened at once as well, like a celiac diagnosis and COVID and my first child. It was all happening at once. And I know so many people were in that same boat. Yeah, I've learned so much since then. And I know, like, it may seem like not such a big thing to talk about. I know that people have been through way heavier stuff than I have. But in the same vein, to not feel like your problem is,
not worth talking about,
is too little to talk about. Yeah, because I think that's another issue in itself. Like when people don't talk about things, I felt like that.
Well, because people often say like, but that's not as bad as, and that feeds into the embarrassment. Oh, well, that's nowhere near as bad as people in war-torn countries or people with serious trauma or, who've been affected by suicide. So again, that's another reason to say, it's not worth talking about. I should just keep it to myself. But we know where that goes. And so it is really important to talk about, because the fact is that even though it's just celiac disease, which people might refer to it as, it got you to a point where you were pretty much on your knees and unable to function. And if you didn't find the answer, who knows where you'd be now. So it actually is pretty serious. And given how common it is, it's really important that people be aware of it. What do you want people to know about celiac disease? Can you sum it up? What's your message to people?
Yeah, so the number one thing I would say is if you haven't had celiac disease testing, it is super simple. It's just a blood test. Go forward and get the testing for it. And if you are in that testing phase, if you think gluten is affecting you, do not go gluten-free before you get the testing. I did that and I was in a world of pain going off gluten. It was only for like a month or two or something like that, but my body started obviously doing the healing and it figured out that it should be off gluten. And then I had to get onto a gluten challenge, which was probably the hardest part to diagnosis for me. Even pre, all the symptoms and everything I was having before, they were the worst 6 weeks that I went through. So don't change your diet and go get the test and see what it comes back as, because obviously it's flying under the radar. As I said, 1 in 70 people are estimated to have it and 80% are going undiagnosed. So it's crazy. Yeah, please go forward and get tested for it. Even if some people are asymptomatic with it and doing just as much damage. So yeah, you could have it and not know, not to freak people out or anything, but yeah, just speak to your doctor about it and see if they'd be comfortable with you getting the testing. If that's something you think you should be screened for. And yeah, the other thing I'd say is, if someone is gluten-free or who has celiac disease, just have a chat to them and learn a little bit more about it and how they're kind of dealing with things in their own lives. And they might need some help in some way. And you could, possibly help them out by just reaching out to them, asking if they want to go out for a meal or, asking if you could maybe make some food for them. Like that is a huge thing for us. If someone takes the time to learn about this disease and the gluten-free diet and is like, you know what, like I did a bit of research and I found out that, you might like these, gluten-free biscuits or something. You just pick them up from the supermarket and just, or invite them out to dinner or something and ask what their dietary requirements are. That's a massive thing. It's huge. And that may seem really little and insignificant, but for us, that's like, wow, you're taking the time to figure that out. That's really cool.
Good. Some good points. And where can people find your podcast and more of you and your content?
A Gluten-Free Family on Instagram. And you can find my podcast. It's under all the podcasting apps, A Gluten-Free Podcast. I thought I'd make it really easy for searchability.
Yeah.
Just to have it as A Gluten-Free Podcast.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thanks for
you can also send me an email too as well, aglutenfreefamily@gmail.com if you want to reach out. Perfect, mate. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks so much for sharing that story. It's not one that you hear often, but it's obviously something that's relevant to a whole lot of people. So I think it's important that we have a think about it and probably know someone in our lives, or maybe we should go get tested ourselves. So yeah, just thanks for putting it out there like that and getting over the embarrassment to help yourself and help others and end up in a good spot now, man. So good to see you doing well. Yeah, thanks, Cal, man. And seriously, you're doing a great job with this podcast and all the work you're doing too. So I think, any chance to talk about men's physical and mental health is a win in my book. So keep up the great work yourself. Awesome. And thanks for having me on. Thank you. That's it for this episode. If you like what we're doing, please jump on board with our mental health movement by following Youngblood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Youngblood Mental Health on TikTok. If you're already following, we'd love you to get more involved. Look out for our new weekly question time videos we've just started doing and leave a comment to make yourself part of the conversation.
Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel, so bless us with a subscription. And most importantly, please share the show with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.